Hello, dear participants of today's discussion. Today, we are going to discuss on one of the famous American poets, Wallace Stevens. The plan of discussion is about the fact of his life and the selected poems that are there in UPHESC advertisement 51. So, the discussion is going on with the important facts that are in nutshells about Wallace Stevens. The first thing that we need to know that what is his birth name and what is the pseudonym, because in exams like UGC net or in competitive exams there is always questions on the pseudonyms of the author. So the birth name of Wallace Stevens is Wallace Stevens as we know it, but the important thing is to notice about the pseudonym. The artificial name that he used, that was Peter Parasol. One important fact that his date of birth is 22nd October 1879. We can remind his date of birth with Mahatma Gandhi. He was also of 2nd October. And the place of birth is Pennsylvania, United States of America. Another important fact that we really need to know about the death time, the time when he was died, it was August 2nd, 1955. What was the basic age of throughout? He lived 75 years. And now the things that we need to know, the cause of his death, because such types of the questions are there in exams. Like the cause of his death was stomach cancer. For giving you more relevant or significant connection of cause of the death, we know that questions like what was the cause of death of Keats, John Keats, cause of death is always asked that it was tuberculosis. So when we see about some author, and if we know about the cause of the death or the reason of the death, it becomes one of the important questions. So stomach cancer was the reason when Wallace Stevenson was alive and he was suffering from stomach cancer. And one more thing, that there is always the masterpiece or the master connections of author, that why that particular author the poet is known for. So Wallace Stevens is known for especially contrasting the harshness of the modern industrialized life with the magnificence of nature, because during his time there was revolution, and industrial revolution was at its peak, and people were, or the author of the time were not supporting industrial revolution. And there were a lot of discussion, like if you have read about the hard times. So he has not discussed the harshness of the industrial revolution, but he gave another fact or the another part of the time, that was magnificence of the nature. One of the greatest qualities of Wallace Stevens is he used superior diction and dignified rhythm in his writing. So his poems are really very breathtaking when you read it, as the poems that are given in our uh, syllabus is 13 Ways Towards Looking a Blackbird. This poem is breathtaking when you read and understand the significance of the lines. Now, few more important facts that we can see that are relevant for the discussion. As I said that there is always some masterpiece, there is always some master connections or the qualities of the author that we really need to know. So is also the case that another part, that who has inspired the author or who has been inspired by the author. So here we can see that Wallace Stevens inspired many coming poets of his time, and Stevens' works inspired the James Merrill, Donald Justice, John Asbury, Mark Strand, and John Hollander. These were the poets of the generation who were inspired by the work of Wallace Stevens. And they have also used dignified and superior diction, dignified rhythm, and also focused on the magnificence of the nature as Wallace Stevens did in his work. One of the qualities or one of his writing styles that was criticized, and that was being too abstract and philosophical, because his writing is very philosophical. If you have slight reading of his poems, especially that are given in the syllabus, you will find that he's not discussing things very concrete basis. We need secondary imagination to understand it. Wallace Stevens has influenced by, as we say that Wallace Stevens inspired, and now we can see that who has inspired Wallace Stevens. So you see that Wallace Stevens has influenced by, now we can highlight it. It really need a good highlighter. He was influenced by Charles Baudelaire. Charles Baudelaire is very famous name when we study theory or the poem. So he was inspired by Charles Baudelaire. Stephen Mallarme, जो स्टेफन मेलाम्स की राइटिंग है, स्पेशली द पोएट्री सेक्शन, हैज इंस्पायर्ड हिम अ लॉट. Jules Lefreg and Walt Whitman, that was an American poet. Walt Whitman's writing, you know that you might have read about Abraham Lincoln, when lilac last is to reward bloom. So this is the greatest contribution of Walt Whitman. Leaves of Grass is the greatest contribution. He has revised it 9 times, and the last one is known as Deathbed Edition. So these are the things that you can notice, that who has been inspired and who has inspired to Wallace Stevens. His countrymen, like or his name, like Walt Whitman, is one of the important poet who is from the same country or the contemporary times. So next is literary movement. कौन से movement से ज़्यादा जुड़े हुए हैं? You see that he is related from the modernism के time से जुड़े हुए हैं. Now awards that are important, because there are number of the awards that author or the poet receives, but there are few awards among them that are magnificent, like Pulitzer Prize for the poetry. So he also received the Pulitzer Prize for the poetry in 1955 and Frost Medal in 1991. These two awards are very important on his credit. Next awards that he got, that was Wolinson Prize for poetry. It was in 1949, and the National Book Award for Poetry 1951 and 1955. इसको याद करने के दो तरीके हैं कि 1951 1955 में इन्होंने 2 अवार्ड्स रिसीव किए. द फर्स्ट वाज नेशनल बुक अवार्ड फॉर द पोएट्री एंड सेकंड वन इज फ्रॉस्ट मेडल. तो दोनों 1951 में है, एंड 1955 में भी इनको नेशनल बुक अवार्ड for the poetry मिली है, and the second one is a Pulitzer Prize for the poetry. So these were the important facts that we can heed over. We should not escape or leave these facts, Now moving towards some important facts of the poems that are given in the syllabus, and the first one is 13 ways of looking at a blackbird. This poem is very philosophical, very abstract, as we had discussed that he has also been criticized for being very abstract and philosophical. So, if we start to read about the poem and see towards the explanation, then we will find the abstract nature and the philosophical nature of the poem. But in spite of these things, we also need to collect some facts. We also need to collect some data that are there in this poem, and these data is very important to carry over. Like 13 ways of looking at a blackbird is a poem from Wallace Stevens' first book of poetry. ये बात आपको जाना है कि ये फर्स्ट बुक ऑफ पोएट्री से ली गई है, एंड इसका नाम क्या था? द नेम ऑफ द फर्स्ट बुक ऑफ द पोएट्री इज हारमोनियम. आपको याद करने का मैं एक तरीका बता सकता हूँ. आपकी कब कम सपोज हारमोनियम, जैसे कि ही हैज आल्सो यूज्ड डिग्निफाइड राइम, तो आप एक कल्पना कर सकते हैं. यू कैन जस्ट इमेजिन दैट वॉलेस स्टीवेंस इज प्लेइंग हारमोनियम बिकॉज ही वाज आल्सो he has also used dignified rhythm and also the superior dictions. So harmonium was the name of his first collection of the poetry, and 13 ways of looking at a blackbird was published in it. The poem consists of the 13 short separate sections, each of with the mention of the blackbird. अब इस blackbird जो एक एनिमल है उसमें 13 शॉर्ट्स हैं. जैसे आजकल आप रील देखते हैं उसी तरह से आप समझ लीजिए देयर आर 13 शॉर्ट्स. देयर इज दीज 13 शॉर्ट्स आर द सेपरेट सेक्शंस एंड ईच ऑफ व्हिच मेंशंस ब्लैकबर्ड. सारे के सारे ने ब्लैकबर्ड को मेंशन किया है. तो इससे हमें क्या समझ में आता है कि ब्लैकबर्ड is symbolized in 13 forms. और आपको मैं बताऊं कि 13 ways of looking at a blackbird, the blackbird is the symbol of the life. In fact, the life is observed from the 13 sides of the blackbird with the activities of the blackbird. And one more thing that we need to know in this poem, that it is written in the form of the haiku. अभी हाइकू आपने इसके पहले भी सुना होगा, तो आपको मैं थोड़ा सा इसमें बता देता हूं कि व्हाट इज हाइकू इंडीड. हाइकू in fact is taken from Japanese origin. It has 3 line and 3 line has specific pattern. जैसे कि हमने एक पैटर्न लिखा है 575. 3 line has specific pattern. The first line is written in the 5 syllable, second line is written in 7 syllable, and the last line is written in 5 syllable. So 575, 575. So this is the structure of the haiku. So it is written in haiku. The 13 ways of looking at a blackbird is written in haiku. But one thing, it is not written in the traditional form of the haiku, of the old traditional form of the haiku. It has some modernization. So if we ask that what is the form of the poem, then we can say haiku. But if there is also one option in your question that does it meet with the traditional definition of the haiku, then certainly no. What was the first publication date of 13 ways of looking towards or the looking at a blackbird? It was first published in October 1917 and it was published by Alfred Kremborg. कुछ चीज़ें हैं जो हमें जानने की ज़रूरत है. जैसे कि आप एमाइली डिकिंसन को जब आप पढ़ रहे होते हैं तो आपको ये जानना जरूरी है that who has published his poem, who was the person who collected his poem. जैसे अगर हम हिंदी में कबीरदास की बात करें तो किसने उनके पोम को उनके शिष्यों ने किया हुआ है. Now coming with some important lines that may be asked in your exam, or you can say that are very important. Like we can see that here I was of three minds. You see, there are written of the three minds, and three minds में क्या क्या है? Like a tree in which there are three blackbirds. We see that in the poem is divided in 13 sorts or the separate sections, and each section mention blackbirds. So the you see in this section it is written in the haiku pattern, but that is not in the traditional haiku pattern, yet it has followed it. I was of the three minds like a tree in which there are three blackbirds. इसमें तीन माइंड की बात की गई है, और आप देखिए तीन माइंड और वो भी लाइक अ ट्री, यानी कि एक पेड़ के तीन दिमाग है. So this is one of the examples, and this is one of the parts of the life when there is multiple psychological aspect of the person and they are pondering over on different things. Now the next part is a man and a woman. अब वो तीन माइंड क्या है? अ मैन एंड अ वुमेन आर वन. अब इसमें कहते हैं कि अ मैन एंड अ वुमेन आर वन, इट मीन्स इट इज टॉकिंग अबाउट द इक्वलिटी. अ मैन एंड अ वुमेन एंड अ ब्लैक बर्ड आर वन. अब नाउ फ्रॉम equality of the gender is transferred with the equality of the universality of the life, and that universality of the life is considered with the image or the combination of the blackbird. It means a man or the woman or the blackbird, they are the magnificence of nature. जैसे कि हमने शुरू में बात किया कि he is very abstract in his writing, very philosophical in his writing. So he doesn't find any difference between the existence of the man and the woman. If we consider from the modern term man and a woman, we certainly are going to talk about the equality, liberty, fraternity, or the equality of the gender, many things. But when you read the last line, a man and a woman and a blackbird, your perspective will change. It will take another bent of the philosophical nature. So this is something that was different in the writing of Wallace Stevens. If we see on the next slide, then another important poem of the uh, Wallace Stevens that is discussed or in the slips, that is the Emperor of Ice Cream. Now you see another label of the ice cream, the Emperor of Ice Cream. इस पोएम को डिस्कशन करने से आप पहले आपको मैं बता दूं, थोड़ी सी चीज याद दिलाता हूं कि this collection of the poem was also published in Harmonium, and you know that Harmonium is the first collection of the first part of Wallace Stevens. जो इसका पहला पार्ट है, जैसे कि आप बात करें यहाँ पर भी मैंने लिखा हुआ है फर्स्ट कलेक्शन ऑफ द पोएट्री, एंड इट वाज फर्स्ट पब्लिश्ड इन 1922. अब अगर हम बात करें इसके पहले वाली स्लाइड में, तो यहाँ पर हमने देखा कि इट वाज फर्स्ट पब्लिश्ड इन 1917 बाय अल्फ्रेड क्रेमबोर. अब जाहिर सी बात है, इट वाज फर्स्ट पब्लिश्ड इन 13 ways of looking at a blackbird is published in 1917, then and the last one, the Emperor of the Ice Cream, is published in 1922. So this is the later one in the same collection, the same collection of the poem. And what is there in this poem? In fact, this is the description of a writing about the dress of a beautiful woman. एक ब्यूटीफुल वुमेन के ड्रेस के राइटिंग के ऊपर है. बहुत छोटा सा पोम है, और इसके फर्स्ट स्टेंजा में और लास्ट स्टेंजा में एम्परर ऑफ द आइसक्रीम इस्तेमाल किया गया है. ये अक्सर जो पूछा जाता है, जो इम्पोर्टेंट थिंग है वो है कि व्हाट इज एम्परर ऑफ द आइसक्रीम. सो इट इज रिलेटेड द ड्रेस और द एम्ब्रॉयडरी ऑफ द ड्रेस. One more thing that I would like to add in this information, that who is the biographer of Wallace Stevens. Then you can write down the name of the Paul Mariani, who is the biographer and also identifies the poem as one of the Stevens' personal favorite. ये बात ध्यान रखिएगा कि it was the personal favorites from the Harmonium. जो हारमोनियम का कलेक्शन था, हर एक राइटर का अपना कुछ ना कुछ फेवरेट होता है, तो दिस पोएम वाज द पर्सनल favorites of Wallace Stevens. And who has discovered it? This is discovered by Paul Mariani. And Paul Mariani was the Stevens biographer. The poem bears a deliberately commonplace costume. Costume के ऊपर पूरा का पूरा डिस्कशन है, and it also talks about a beautiful lady and the costumes. He wrote in a letter, क्या लिखा था, and yet seems to me to contain something of the essential gaudiness of poetry. That is the reason why I like it. It has something gaudiness. It is talking about the mundane thing. Now, the important lines that we can see for this poem especially, that is, let be finale of scene. The only emperor is the emperor of ice cream. So I'm giving you the short or the tricks to remember it, because the emperor of the ice cream is always confused with when Johnson sometimes, and sometimes with Robert Frost. So these amalgamations should not be considered. Only just remember that the emperor of the ice cream is written by Wallace Stevens, and that was a basic research of Paul Mariani, who says that it is written on the commonplace costume. And it is also why there is the emperor of the ice cream, because it is considered and also compared with the costume, the commonplace costume, and it has some gaudiness on it. So that was all about the poem that is that can be considered for Wallace Stevens. Thank you for staying with this discussion. Hopefully, we are meeting in next discussion of the syllabus. Stay tuned and study well.